The story began with some man's hand slowly and warily reaching for a sword, as if hesitant with every movement. That person turned out to be E-rank Hunter sitting all bloody and pointing his sword at someone or rather something. It turned out that he was pointing his sword at the stone statues which were slowly but surely approaching him like undead guards awakened from an age-old slumber. In his eyes distorted by painful fear, there was despair, the sense of helplessness before the inevitable. And on his face, distorted by agony, it showed just the same. One could see the inner conflict, the inordinate suicidal striving for perfection mixed with the fire of anger, and the despair turned inward toward himself for his weakness, for his shortcomings. And just when he thought it couldn't get any worse, one of the statues swung its weapon at him as if obeying the orders of an invisible lord. The city of Seoul was located in South Korea, and it was here that the main character appeared. Even among those who were also E-rank Hunter, Jin-Woo was the weakest of them all. Now it was headed for the gateway at a construction site in Seoul. One of the gates that connected the other dimension to their world. Hunter Kim could be seen as well. He was also a member of this dungeon-clearing squad. Before heading into the dungeon, he decided to get himself a cup of coffee, and at that moment a man called out to him. That man turned out to be a retired hunter like Mr. Kim, Hunter Beck. The reason Hunter Beck had decided to return to the way of the hunter was that his wife was pregnant, and money had to come from somewhere. Hunter Kim confirmed that in his situation the best thing to do was to get back on the hunter's path. But Hunter Beck did not hide the truth from him, making it clear that he was deeply worried. Because after such a long absence he might have lost his edge. While Hunter Beck was voicing his worries to Hunter Kim, the concern in his tone was unmistakable. Hunter Kim in turn ignored Hunter Beck's words and shifted his attention to Hunter Jin-Woo as soon as the latter appeared. He was immediately approached by a fellow hunter who had also come to clear the dungeon and was told something. Hunter Kim soon caught up as well and asked Jin-Woo about his condition. After all that Hunter Beck had seen, he got the impression that Jin-Woo was a very strong hunter. Because everyone seemed genuinely happy to see him. Hunter Kim grinned. After hearing the assumption from Hunter Beck, Hunter Kim clarified the situation and told him that Hunter Jin-Woo was actually the weakest hunter. After that he continued to mock Jin-Woo. From the expression on Jin-Woo's face, it was clear that Hunter Kim's words had hurt him. As a result, in order to at least cheer himself up a little, Hunter Jin-Woo decided to get himself a coffee, but even there, he was out of luck. The coffee had just run out. The employee apologized to him, but it didn't change the situation in any way. Just then from behind, Jin-Woo heard a scream. As he turned around, he saw his old acquaintance B-rank Hunter Ju, who immediately showed her surprise that Hunter Jin-Woo was all wounded again. Then Jin-Woo explained that during the last trip to the E-rank dungeon the group he went with hadn't taken a single healer hunter with them. Ju, still showing him sympathy, expressed her concern for him. After all, it was just E-rank's dungeon, and as usual things hadn't gone smoothly. He was the only one affected. He went on to give more details about his dungeon track, and Ju, clearly upset, resented the actions of the team members from that raid. To this, Jin-Woo grinned and reassured her, saying that it was okay, he was used to this kind of thing. And now they were finally about to head into the dungeon with a shout. One of the hunters gathered everyone into a pile, but they were interrupted by an experienced hunter Song who summoned all the hunters. He said that even if he wasn't suited for the role, he'd like to be the leader of this raid. And in the end, everyone agrees to give the role of hunter. Everyone agreed to give the role of raid leader to Song, as he was the strongest hunter among all those gathered. Of course, Hunter Jin-Woo also agreed with this decision. After the leader was unanimously chosen, everyone entered the dungeon, connecting another space to their world. Looking at the expression on Hunter Jin-Woo's face, it was clear that he was prepared to give his best. With that, the group finally entered the dungeon, ready to face the challenges that lay ahead. The workers at the construction site, having ensured that all members of the squad had successfully entered the dungeon, stood by. As the hunters were being escorted out, the workers put up fences. The cafeteria worker wished he had been able to give Hunter Jin-Woo a cup of coffee. Even the simple cafeteria workers knew about Jin-Woo, and they couldn't help but marvel at the fact that Hunter Jin-Woo always came out of the dungeon wounded. We could see that one of the squad members was using healing magic. It turned out that it was Hunter Ju-hee. Almost immediately after entering the dungeon, Hunter Jin-Woo gets wounded and healer Ju-hee has to treat him. Hunter Song destroyed monsters with his fire spell, reducing them to ashes. Hunter Kim kept up with him, chopping up any monsters that got in his way. As for the rest of the hunters, they did quite well, calmly destroying the monsters they encountered. The raid was nearing its conclusion. But Hunter Jin-Woo noticed that something was bothering healer Ju-hee. After dealing with all the monsters, everyone gathered together. Ju-hee was still showing his curiosity. However, Ju-hee couldn't understand why, after being injured so much, Jin-Woo still continued to walk in the dungeon. To this, Jin-Woo replied, not revealing his sick mother, saying, "Unless you want to be pitied." Instead, he said that it was just fun to go to the dungeons. His words made Ju-hee very angry, because every time he got hurt she had to treat him. In turn, Ju-hee pointed out that he should make sure this fun didn't become his undoing. Since everyone had dealt with the monsters, they gathered together in a circle. A crystal fell from each mob upon death. These crystals could be sold, and with the money they could buy the equipment they needed to help them further clear the dungeons. But because Jin-Woo was very weak, he could only get one E-rank crystal. Unlike the E-rank crystals, which were worth only pennies, the C-rank crystals were worth thousands. It seemed that the raid was already over when suddenly one of the raid participants discovered another passage in the dungeon. They found themselves standing before a dark and deep cavern leading into the void. The group leader, Mr. Song, realized that this was most likely a double-layer dungeon and that the dungeon boss was still alive. With his unique fire magic, Mr. Song created a fireball. Afterward, he launched it into the depths of the cave. Flying into the depths of the cave, the fireball illuminated a small part of it, and so Mr. Song's attack radius reached its limit and flames erupted in the depths of the cave. A theory suddenly popped into Mr. Song's head. He reminded everyone that if they didn't kill the boss, the dungeon wouldn't close, so if the gate was still open, the boss must still be alive. Mr. Song said that the rules stated they must inform the Hunters Association and wait for further instructions. Everyone was confused, no one understood what Mr. Song was trying to say. But if other hunters reached the boss faster, the reward for the entire raid would be reduced. The squad leader suggested that they all go together and kill the boss. However, among the men in the squad, there were some who were wary, so they decided whether to go or not by voting. Since there were only 17 people participating in this raid, they needed to make a decision carefully. Some wanted to continue raiding and make more money, so they voted in favor, while others felt threatened by the continuation of the raid and feared for their lives, so they voted against it. Some people voted for and some voted against. In the end, the votes were equally divided. The final vote went to Sung Jin-Woo. He had only earned one E-rank crystal in this raid, and he needed money to keep his mother healthy, to protect her, and to keep his family safe. He voted to go after the boss. The decision has been made, and all 17 of them are heading toward the boss. They've been traveling for a long time, and it's been 20 minutes trying to defuse the situation. To ease the increasingly tense situation, Hunter Sung Jin-Woo decided to strike up a conversation with Joo-hee. From the expression on his face, it was clear that he was feeling awkward about what he had said earlier. The others had to continue the raid as well, so there was no time to delay. Joo-hee tried her best not to show her emotions, but Jin-Woo didn't believe her words. He asked her directly if she was sure she wasn't angry with him. In the end, even the always calm and quiet Joo-hee couldn't hold it in any longer. She was really angry at Sung Jin-Woo. Seeing this, Jin-Woo looked extremely apologetic. However, that only made Joo-hee even angrier. And even though the atmosphere between them was somewhat tense, there was still a small spark that quietly existed between the two. Finally, Joo-hee made a request to Hunter Sung Jin-Woo that he treat her to something to eat after today's raid. At first, Jin-Woo was speechless, completely taken aback. Joo-hee mistook that silence as a refusal. But then Jin-Woo spoke. He agreed to her conditions. Their conversation was abruptly interrupted when the raid leader announced that he had found a door leading to the dungeon boss's lair. None of them had ever seen such a door. It was gigantic, ancient, and completely unlike anything they had ever encountered. As the group gathered to see the strange door, suspicion began to creep in. The massive size and ominous design of the entrance made them wonder if it was worth risking their lives for what awaited beyond. Sensing everyone's hesitation, Captain Song stepped forward. He declared that he would not back down, not after everything they had been through. Even if he had to fight alone, he would still go in. His words rekindled the fire of courage in everyone's hearts. They remembered the strength Hunter Song had once displayed, and gradually their anxiety dissipated. The giant door opened heavily, emitting deep underground rumblings. A chill ran through the hunters, but they continued on. Together they entered the boss room. As soon as they stepped through the threshold, torches, mounted on the walls, suddenly burst into flames, illuminating the dark hall. Only now could they see the full scale of the room. It was both vast and terrifying. The walls were lined with countless stone statues, each with its own distinct form. Some held weapons, some held musical instruments, all carved with terrifying detail. Sung Jin-Woo stood silently watching, amazed by the architecture and atmosphere of the place. But there was one statue that caught his eye more than all, the one in the middle of the room. It was much larger than the others, and there was something about it that made him feel uneasy. Jin-Woo couldn't shake off the feeling of unease in his heart. The statue's presence was overwhelming, and its enormous size didn't seem to be accidental. The group began to disperse, searching the room for clues. Despite their best efforts, only one detail really stood out. What Mr. Song discovered was a magical seal carved right in the room. However, before he could get closer to check, another hunter called him back. Before them was a statue that was completely different from the rest. It had wings, and in its hand was a stone tablet on which were engraved strange glowing runes. The group gathered watching curiously. Mr. Song stepped forward and began to read and translate the ancient writings. The hunters fell silent, listening intently to each word as the meaning of the symbols began to unfold. While Mr. Song was translating, Hunter Sung Jin-Woo suddenly felt his shirt being pulled lightly. It was Juhi. With a worried voice, she pointed towards the large statue in the center of the Great Hall. She whispered that while Mr. Song was reading the ancient text she had seen clearly, the statue had moved. It was looking at them. We can clearly see the shocked look on Hunter Sung Jin-Woo's face. He stood still, confused, with a strong feeling that something was wrong in this room. Meanwhile, Mr. Song was still trying to translate the runes on the stone tablet when a loud noise rang out, breaking the silence. Everyone turned to look at once. The giant door they had passed through had slammed shut behind them. A hunter stepped forward. It was obvious he wanted to leave. He didn't care about the boss or the treasure in the room, he just wanted to get out. Without hesitation, he approached the boss room door. But as soon as he reached out to touch it, Mr. Song shouted loudly, "Don't touch the door." But it was too late. Something had moved, so fast that no one had time to see what had happened. In just a split second, the stone statue standing near the door swung out a fatal blow, cutting off the head of the hunter who had just touched the door. The head fell to the stone floor, to the utter shock of the group. Then the statue returned to its original position, silent, motionless, as if it had never moved. On the faces of the remaining hunters were looks of utter fear and shock. Now they understood, these statues could move and they could kill. The timid Juhi, completely overwhelmed by fear, hugged Hunter Sung Jin-Woo tightly and wouldn't let go. At that moment, something flashed through Jin-Woo's mind. He remembered Juhi's words. She had said that the giant statue in the middle of the room had been watching them. Instinctively, Jin-Woo immediately turned his head. His eyes met the eyes of the giant statue in the middle of the hall. An overwhelming, bone-chilling fear surged through his body. This wasn't just a statue, it was something else, something far more dangerous. But that wasn't the only problem. The real danger was the smaller statues. One of them had just killed a hunter in the blink of an eye. Jin-Woo's gaze darted around the room, and what he saw made his blood run cold. A large number of those same statues were lined along the walls, unmoving. For now, Hunter Sung Jin-Woo began to analyze the situation. His thoughts raced. Then something struck him even harder. The hunter who had just been killed, he wasn't weak. He was a D-rank, stronger than me, Jin-Woo realized. The shock hit him like a wave. If someone stronger than him could be killed so effortlessly, then what chance did he have? Someone had just been killed by a statue, instantly, with a single strike. This was supposed to be just a low-ranked dungeon one, where there shouldn't have been any serious problems. But after what had happened, the runic text carved on the slab was the last thing on anyone's mind. Even the strongest among them, squad leader Mr. Song, was visibly shaken. He too stood frozen in disbelief as the realization set in. The massive statue at the center of the chamber might also be able to move. As Mr. Song voiced his suspicion, Hunter Sung Jin-Woo turned his gaze to the statue at the center. And then something happened that defied all expectations. The statue looked back. It was subtle but unmistakable. Its eyes moved. It was watching him. Suddenly, memories came flooding back. A vision of Hunter Sung Jin-Woo's very first raid surfaced. How he was wounded by a goblin-like creature, how he had collapsed from exhaustion, cold, hunger, the brink of death. He had always been the weakest, always the one holding the group back. One of the main reasons why he was constantly getting injured, even in the lowest-ranked dungeons, was painfully simple. He didn't have decent gear. His weapons were subpar, his armor barely held together. He was always fighting at a disadvantage. And now, as he stood before a monstrous statue that could kill in an instant, that same feeling of helplessness returned. Throughout it all, one thought had kept Hunter Sung Jin-Woo going: his mother. Her life depended on expensive treatment, and to afford it, Jin-Woo constantly threw himself into dangerous dungeons again and again. Other hunters were always baffled by how often he ended up injured, even in E-rank dungeons. He would emerge from every raid battered, barely standing, sometimes carried out on a stretcher. In addition to paying for his mother's hospital bills, he also had to replace his clothes after every few runs. His gear would often be torn to shreds, worn out from battle. He had faced all kinds of monsters, one of them even a cyclops-like creature, but none of them gave off the same aura as this statue. This one was different. Unlike any monster he had faced before, this statue radiated an oppressive, suffocating danger, and perhaps because Hunter Sung Jin-Woo had stood at death's edge more times than he could count, he sensed it. Without hesitation, he reached out and grabbed the trembling Juhi standing beside him. Her body was shaking, her eyes wide with fear. Then in a commanding tone that cut through the panic, Jin-Woo shouted, "Everyone, get down now." The other hunters barely had time to react. Everyone was stunned. The weakest hunter in the raid, Sung Jin-Woo, had raised his voice and given an order in a moment of life-and-death urgency. No one expected him to speak, let alone act so decisively. Then it happened. The statue's eyes flared, bright and violent like lightning tearing through a stormy sky. In the next instant, it unleashed a devastating beam aimed directly at Sung Jin-Woo and the healer Ju-hee. But they had already thrown themselves to the ground. The beam scorched past them, tearing through the floor. The sheer power of the attack was terrifying. Smoke hissed from the statue's eyes, and the place where the beam had struck had turned molten, almost liquefied, steaming from the intense heat. As the hunters began to process what had just occurred, the room was filled with the scent of burning stone and the echoes of chaos. Some were quick to recover and helped others to safety, but horror still lingered on their faces. One hunter screamed upon seeing a charred hand, the only remaining part of someone who had not moved fast enough. This single attack from the giant statue had killed several hunters instantly, and many of those who survived had only done so because of Hunter Sung Jin-Woo's sudden command to stay down. Beside him, Ju-hee lay motionless on the ground, unconscious or frozen in fear. Mr. Song's voice rang out sharply through the smoke and fear, "Nobody move. Stay where you are, don't get up." Mr. Song raised his voice once more, warning everyone. If anyone stood up again, the statue would attack. At first, not everyone believed him, but after witnessing the devastating power of that beam, they obeyed without question. Seeing Hunter Sung Jin-Woo deeply worried, Mr. Song offered some context. "Miss Ju-hee, she doesn't handle fear well," he said softly. "That's why she only participates in low-rank dungeons." But then he looked around at the terrifying statues surrounding them. His voice dropped lower, laced with unease, "Though looking at this place, can we really call this a low-rank dungeon?" Mr. Song's gaze shifted back to Jin-Woo. "You noticed that, didn't you?" he added. "Only those who listened to your command survived." Sung Jin-Woo blinked in surprise. He hadn't realized that. Jin-Woo shook his head. "No, I just sensed danger, that's all." It was then that Jin-Woo noticed something terrible. Mr. Song's left arm was missing. Blood soaked his side and the wound looked severe. Without hesitating, Jin-Woo rushed to his side and applied pressure, stopping the bleeding as best he could. His movements were swift, practiced, not the actions of a mere E-rank hunter. While Jin-Woo tended to the wound, the rest of the hunters sat in stunned silence, watching the colossal statue with terrified eyes. On Mr. Song's face, a look of disbelief lingered. The difficulty level of this dungeon was far beyond anything he had anticipated. He stared at the giant statue thinking, could this be an S-rank dungeon? And then he remembered something. The rules. The temple was called Kartanen, and the rules of this place were carved into the stone. The first rule, worship the Lord. The second rule, praise the Lord. The third rule, prove your faith. And beneath these inscriptions was a note. The note beneath the commandments was chillingly clear. Those who do not follow the rules will die. With panic thick in the air, only two people remained calm enough to think rationally. Mr. Song and Hunter Sung Jin-Woo. Realizing the danger they were in, the two began discussing what could be done. Jin-Woo's eyes narrowed in thought, and something began to take shape in his mind. Meanwhile, Mr. Song voiced a concern. Destroying the statues, it would take too long, and we don't even know if that would stop them. As they considered their next move, the scene shifted. We're shown a gate, an ominous swirling portal identical to the one the hunters had entered through earlier. This gate was the reason they were in such peril now. These gates had begun appearing around 10 years ago, their sudden emergence turning the world upside down. They could appear anywhere, on the ground, in the sky, inside buildings, completely at random. With the arrival of the gates came monsters, and something else, hunters, people who had awakened special powers to fight against the threats emerging from the gates. But there was a catch. Once a hunter awakened, their power level became fixed. It could not grow. This meant someone like Hunter Sung Jin-Woo and E-rank would always remain weak. Anyone could become a hunter, but not everyone became strong. Sung Jin-Woo's story was the embodiment of this cruel reality. Despite the danger, despite the injuries, despite always being one step from death, he kept entering gates because he had no choice. Within each gate, hunters would encounter all manner of monsters, beasts, abominations, even creatures resembling gods or demons. And this temple, Kartanen, was unlike anything they had ever seen. Protagonist Hunter Sung Jin-Woo had faced terrifying monsters before, even in D-rank gates. But now, as he sat on the cold stone floor of the temple staring at the massive statue with glowing eyes, he felt a fear unlike anything he'd ever known. His thoughts were heavy, not just with fear but with helplessness. And then his eyes drifted to Mr. Song, whose left arm was still bleeding. The older hunter, pale but composed, noticed his gaze. "I brought 3 healers with me on this raid," Mr. Song said grimly, "but there's nothing they can do now." One of them had already died, killed instantly by the beam that shot from the statue's eyes. The second was paralyzed with fear, his mind too clouded to even think clearly. And now the third, a B-rank healer, was lying on the floor completely consumed by the same overwhelming terror. None of them could move. None of them dared to rise. So they sat frozen in place, their bodies trembling, as they prayed the giant statue wouldn't strike again. Hunter Sung Jin-Woo and Mr. Song remained still as well, not just out of fear, but because they were thinking, quietly, desperately. What could they do? They couldn't fight it. They couldn't run. And every second that passed only made the silence in that vast, deadly temple more unbearable. Most of the hunters were paralyzed, not just by fear but by everything they had witnessed. The brutal deaths, the helplessness, the overwhelming power of the statues, it was too much. And on Hunter Sung Jin-Woo's face, that desperation was clear. He wasn't thinking about fighting anymore, he was just trying to survive. Desperately trying to find a way, any way to avoid facing the wrath of these statues. Then suddenly, movement, one of the hunters stood up. He had recently joined a major guild and didn't want his life to end so soon. Not here, not like this. Confidence burned in his eyes, fueled by pride, and the power in his legs. He believed his speed could save him. Ignoring the squad leader's desperate command to stay down, the hunter braced himself, then launched forward. In a flash, he was sprinting toward the doors with everything he had. His powerful legs drove him like a machine, his gaze fixed on escape. For a moment, it looked like he might make it. But the statue in the center of the room had already seen him. Its eyes gleamed like molten gold, and in the next instant, a beam erupted from the statue's eyes faster than thought. And just like that, all that remained of the hunter were his feet, still standing where he'd launched from, everything else obliterated. The other hunters couldn't believe what they'd seen. Some screamed in raw horror. Others couldn't even speak, their voices stolen by fear. And yet in the midst of that silence, one emotion surged stronger than fear inside Sung Jin-Woo. He was afraid, yes, but he was angry. Angry at his own powerlessness. Angry at this dungeon, at the statues, at the twisted rules that decided who lived and who died. And maybe that anger was what would keep him alive. It was clear to everyone now, these statues could kill them at any moment, but they didn't, and that was the most terrifying part. Squad leader Mr. Song too was baffled. If the statues were so deadly, why weren't they attacking now? Why were they just standing there? So the survivors began to think, to reason. These monsters weren't like the others they had encountered in dungeons. Normal monsters attacked anything that moved, but here it was different. The guardian statue at the door only attacked those who approached the exit, and the massive statue in the center, it only attacked those who stood up or made sudden movements. Hunter Sung Jin-Woo sat motionless, deep in thought. His mind raced, trying to make sense of the rules that governed this nightmare. Then something clicked. His eyes slowly turned toward a particular statue different from the rest. It was the one holding the stone slab with runic writing. He remembered Mr. Song had translated those inscriptions before, the rules of the Temple of Kartenin, and now from the look on Sung Jin-Woo's face it was clear he had figured something out. He turned to Mr. Song and asked, what was the first rule of the temple? Mr. Song was confused, unsure why Jin-Woo was asking now of all times. But after a moment's hesitation, he replied with difficulty, the first rule was to worship the Lord. And by the Lord, Jin-Woo said slowly, you probably mean the statue in the center. Mr. Song's eyes widened. Then to his horror, he saw Hunter Sung Jin-Woo begin to rise to his feet. No, wait, what are you doing? Mr. Song cried out, panic in his voice. Jin-Woo kept rising one movement at a time. Mr. Song couldn't understand. Why was he doing this? It made no sense. The center statue had obliterated a man for simply running. Was Jin-Woo out of his mind? But then Mr. Song caught a glimpse of Jin-Woo's face, and all at once his panic melted away. The hysterical shouting from Mr. Song died in his throat. Somehow he realized Jin-Woo knew what he was doing. These were not the eyes of a man about to die. Almost fully on his feet, Hunter Sung Jin-Woo turned to the others, determined to explain the pattern behind the massive statue's behavior. The moment he reached a standing position, the statue's eyes began to glow, bright and menacing. Without hesitation, Jin-Woo dropped back to the ground. In that instant, a flash of something primal crossed his eyes, an indescribable fear of death, pure and overwhelming, and then nothing. The giant statue's glowing eyes dimmed as if reconsidering the attack. Jin-Woo's gamble had paid off. That was when the meaning of the first rule, worship the Lord, finally became clear to him. He quickly turned to the others, urging them to listen. But his words were met with disbelief. To them, it seemed like Jin-Woo had lost his mind. It wasn't until Mr. Song took a closer look, until he saw the fierce certainty in Jin-Woo's expression, that he realized this wasn't madness. Jin-Woo had figured something out. Even though Jin-Woo had bowed his head before the statue, the fire in his eyes made it clear he wasn't submitting out of reverence. He was testing a theory. Sweat poured from Mr. Song's brow, partly from blood loss, partly from the stress of watching Jin-Woo risk his life. Still, something in Jin-Woo's confidence gave him hope. "You know what you're doing, right?" Mr. Song asked hoarsely. Jin-Woo met his gaze unwavering. "I do." For the first time in what felt like forever, Mr. Song grinned. They had no better options anyway. Finally, the other hunters followed suit. One by one, they bowed their heads toward the massive statue, hoping that this act of worship would allow them to live, and maybe even escape. The statue remained seated on its throne, silent and unmoving. B-rank healer Juhi finally came back to her senses, confused and shaken. "What hunters? What statue?" she mumbled, eyes wide. No one answered. No one moved. That was when something changed. The statue's face, just its expression, shifted ever so slightly. Its carved lips curled into something that resembled a smirk. It was subtle but unmistakable. The hunters saw it, and their sense of dread only deepened. Just a change in facial expression, and yet their fear grew tenfold. It was hard to describe, a cold terror that settled in their bones. No one dared to move now, not after what they had seen, the memory of the instant deaths, the vaporized bodies, the screaming. Even Jin-Woo, who had understood the first rule, now found himself frozen. He didn't know what to do next. And now the previously mentioned hunter, Buck, who had only just regained his composure, noticed something strange. The statue wasn't attacking. Even after they had all stood up, nothing happened. For a moment, hope sparked. Taking a chance, Hunter Buck slowly rose to his feet. When the statue didn't react, others followed suit. One by one, the hunters began to stand, cheering, believing it was finally over. But something was wrong. Hunter Sung Jin-Woo felt it first. A sinking feeling gripped him, and the expression on his face darkened. Then came the rumble. A deep, heavy sound echoed through the temple, causing everyone to freeze. The source of the sound. The giant statue in the center was rising. With slow, deliberate steps, the towering stone figure stood up. Each step shattered the floor beneath it, splintering stone like it was nothing. The hunters watched in horror. This wasn't the end, far from it. This was only the beginning of something far worse. The statue was enormous, hundreds of times larger than a human, and with every step it took, it radiated pure malice. Just looking at it struck terror deep into their hearts. In desperation, Mr. Song turned to Hunter Sung Jin-Woo. He wanted to believe Jin-Woo had a plan, but as their eyes met, all hope seemed to fade. Jin-Woo's face was pale, his eyes wide with fear. He didn't have a plan, he had no idea what to do. The massive statue began its attack, not with magic, not with a beam, but by simply stepping on the hunters like they were nothing more than bugs. Hunters were thrown off balance, some tumbling to the ground. Screams echoed across the chamber as they tried to regain their footing. And now Hunter Sung Jin-Woo was finally starting to understand. His mind raced, reaching back to the rules of the temple. He remembered the second one, praise the Lord. He shared this with the others, his voice urgent amid the rising panic. Everyone was in turmoil, struggling to understand how this rule could be fulfilled. Then one of the hunters stepped forward, a man who had once been a member of a church choir. Hope flickered in his eyes. Clutching the small cross that hung around his neck, he raised his voice and began to praise God. Meanwhile, the massive statue continued its slow, thunderous advance. In the face of such overwhelming size and power, the man seemed so incredibly small. And yet, as his voice echoed through the chamber, for a moment it felt like it might be working. But one face did not share in that feeling. Hunter Sung Jin-Woo's. He was watching closely, too closely. Something felt off. And then the statue's face changed. Its features twisted into something even more monstrous, more terrifying. And suddenly its foot was poised above the choir hunter's head. Frozen in terror, the man's face turned ghostly pale. He couldn't even finish his sentence. His voice cracked and died in his throat. That's when it hit Jin-Woo. He's praising the wrong god, but it was too late. Before Jin-Woo could shout, before he could stop it, the enormous statue brought its foot down, crushing the hunter beneath it in a single brutal instant. The shock and horror hit the others like a wave. any remaining semblance of order shattered. Desperation took over. With screams of panic, the hunters began to scatter, mindlessly running in every direction, fleeing from the statue's face, from its wrath, from the realization that there was no way to resist. It looked like a swarm of ants scrambling in every direction, hunters fleeing in terror, trying to escape the unstoppable horror bearing down on them. Some were so overwhelmed by fear that they couldn't even move. Their bodies refused to respond, paralyzed by despair. The giant central statue showed no mercy. It trampled everything in its path, crushing the frozen, the panicked, and the hopeless alike. Hunter D would have died if not for Hunter Sung Jin-Woo. He had pulled her out of the statue's path just in time. Without him, she would have joined the growing number of dead. And now Hunter Buck, bloodied, limping, barely holding on, was staggering toward the far edge of the room. His thoughts drifted to his pregnant wife waiting for him to come home. That image kept him moving. He reached the edge and believed, just for a moment, that he was safe, but safety was an illusion. "Buck, behind you," Hunter Kim screamed. Buck turned in confusion, just as one of the nearby statues activated. The statue, with brutal efficiency, brought its weapon down in a single fluid motion. It sliced him in two, deadly, unforgiving, precise. And then, like nothing had happened, the statue returned to its original position, just like the one at the door. Meanwhile, the massive statue in the center of the chamber continued its march, crushing everything beneath its feet. There was nowhere to run. Behind them were the sentry statues, which only attacked anyone who approached. Each statue had a different weapon: swords, spears, maces, hammers, and each seemed to have its own method of delivering death. Hunter Sung Jin-Woo's heart pounded in his chest. There were enemies in every direction, death in every form, but his mind never stopped working. There had to be a pattern, there had to be a way, and then... As chaos raged on, Hunter Sung Jin-Woo's eyes scanned the room, desperately searching for anything, any clue that could offer salvation. That's when he noticed something. Some of the statues weren't holding weapons, they were holding musical instruments. His mind clicked into action, analyzing the pattern. The statues that had attacked and killed hunters, every single one of them had held a weapon. Swords, spears, axes, but the ones with musical instruments, they hadn't moved at all. If they weren't armed, perhaps they couldn't attack. He immediately shouted to the others, "Go to the statues with instruments. They're not dangerous." The first to respond was squad leader Mr. Song. Despite his injuries, he forced himself up and limped toward a statue holding a stringed instrument. As he reached it, the statue responded. It began to play. The haunting melody echoed through the chamber like a sacred chant. A moment of strange calm spread through the air. Hunter Sung Jin-Woo and Mr. Song both shouted, "Everyone, head toward the statues with instruments." Others followed, desperately clinging to this new hope. Hunter Kim, trembling and pale, reached another statue holding the guitar. His legs gave out beneath him and he collapsed in front of it. Tears ran down his face as he stared at the massive central statue and the bodies of his fallen comrades. Grief and fear overwhelmed him. Meanwhile, Jin-Woo, carrying the barely conscious B-rank healer, Joo-hee, limped toward a statue with a drum. But when they reached it, nothing happened. The statue didn't play, it just stood there, silent, unmoving. Jin-Woo and Joo-hee stared at it in horror. Joo-hee's wound had worsened. She was shaking, drenched in her own tears and blood. Her breathing was shallow. Sung Jin-Woo gently set her down at the foot of the drum-holding statue and whispered something only she could hear. Then, without hesitation, he turned and ran. There was another statue nearby, another musical instrument, and he wasn't going to give up. Not yet. This was the moment Hunter Sung Jin-Woo began to run again, limping, staggering, but still pushing forward. The enormous central statue was watching him. Its gaze followed every movement. But Sung Jin-Woo didn't look back. His body screamed with exhaustion, but he kept moving, dragging himself forward, searching desperately for another statue holding a musical instrument. His face was pale, bloodied, drenched in sweat. His legs barely responded, but he ran with everything he had left. And then, out of nowhere, the massive foot of the central statue, which had seemed far away just a moment ago, came crashing down right above his head. Sung Jin-Woo barely dodged, rolling to the side in time. The ground behind him cracked under the force of the stomp. "Jin-Woo, that's the wrong statue," Mr. Song shouted from across the chamber. Too late. Sung Jin-Woo had stumbled right in front of a statue holding a shield, not an instrument. It moved, the statue's arm lashed out to strike. Joo-hee, left behind with the drum statue, screamed at the top of her lungs. Her voice was raw and desperate. Sung Jin-Woo, bloodied and barely conscious, tried to crawl away from the towering figure. His injuries made even the smallest motion agonizing. He was no longer running, he was dragging himself across the broken floor inch by inch. The massive statue loomed above him, its face twisted into what looked almost like a mocking smile. Sung Jin-Woo was once again on the very edge, dangling between life and death. His breathing ragged, his vision blurred, his entire body soaked in blood. Then, something unexpected. One of the nearby statues, a smaller one shaped like a girl, moved gently. Instead of attacking, she petted him. It was the statue shaped like an angel, and she held no weapon. By some miracle, Sung Jin-Woo had dragged himself to the right place at the last second. He had survived, again. Behind him, the giant statue, the one that had crushed dozens, stopped. The chamber went eerily still. When she finally reached him, she froze in horror. Only then did Jin-Woo notice her expression, wide eyes, mouth trembling like she'd seen something far worse than death. He looked down, his right leg was gone, ripped off, severed completely during the chaos, but he hadn't even noticed. He was too exhausted, physically, mentally, emotionally, to react. He simply leaned back against the statue behind him, breathing shallowly. And Joo-hee, trembling, crying, covered in blood, knelt beside him and began treating what was left of his leg. Blood began pouring from Joo-hee's nose and mouth. Her body trembled, her breathing shallow. In her desperate attempt to heal Sung Jin-Woo's severed leg, she had pushed herself far past her limit. She had given it everything. The remaining squad members could only watch in silence, helpless. The toll this dungeon had taken on them was now painfully clear. Hunter Kim broke the silence. When we entered this dungeon, there were 17 of us, he said quietly. Now there are only 6. And 2 of us, Kim continued, are hanging on by a thread. Everyone glanced toward Joo-hee and Sung Jin-Woo. Kim's voice turned cold. This is all your fault, Mr. Song. You let us in here, you made the call, you rushed the decision, and now look where we are. The accusation cut deep. Mr. Song lowered his gaze. There was nothing he could say in his defense. Then movement, a low grinding sound filled the chamber. The massive statue, though still seated, seemed to shift slightly. The remaining hunters went still, dread crawling up their spines. All eyes turned to the statue. And then the sound again, this time deeper. From the ground a pillar rose. It emerged slowly right in front of the statue's throne, dust and debris falling from its sides. The floor trembled as another mechanism activated beneath them. Something resembling an altar emerged from the earth. The hunters watched in grim silence, unsure of what would come next, terrified that this might be the beginning of another test, another execution. They had already witnessed too much death, and now a circular platform rose slowly from the ground, and in its center, a stone slab dark and ancient. The hunters stared at it confused. None of them knew what it was, but even in his near-broken state, Hunter Sung Jin-Woo understood. It was an altar. The others looked at him in disbelief when he whispered the word, astonished that he could even recognize such a thing. But then a scene flashed before us, an image of ancient rites of offerings placed on stone altars of living beings, sacrificed to satisfy gods or monsters. That was when Sung Jin-Woo understood the third and final commandment of the Temple of Kartanen, prove your faith. After Jin-Woo voiced this realization aloud, Mr. Song's expression shifted. The weight of the truth sank in. Even Oleg, one of the remaining survivors, seemed calmer, more resigned to the inevitable. Then, without warning, one of the 6 surviving hunters stepped forward. Hunter Kim, he drew his sword from his sheath with trembling hands, his eyes burning with a mixture of fury and grief. He raised it not toward the statues but toward someone standing among them. He pointed the tip of his blade at Mr. Song. You, he hissed, you're the reason we're in this hell. His voice shook both from rage and from the weight of what he was about to say. You made the call to enter, you led us here, and now 11 of us are dead. Hunter Kim's voice cracked with the memory of his fallen comrades. You brought us to this place. Now you must be the one to atone. You must sacrifice yourself. The chamber fell into shocked silence. Sung Jin-Woo stepped in, his voice hoarse but firm. This isn't his fault. We all made the choice to follow. But his words were drowned out by Hunter Kim's hysterical shouting. He led us here. And then the unthinkable Mr. Song agreed. He nodded solemnly. I did make that choice, I can't deny it. His voice was calm, accepting. But Jin-Woo shook his head. No, that's not right, that's not what this is. Mr. Song placed a hand on his shoulder. Thank you, Jin-Woo, but I've made peace with it. And with that he turned and walked toward the altar alone. Each step echoed like a funeral bell across the silent temple. Mr. Song stepped slowly toward the altar, its surface carved with strange symbols he had never seen before. A few seconds after he entered the circle, a flame ignited behind him. Hunter Kim, who had insisted Mr. Song offer himself as a sacrifice, didn't seem to grasp what had just happened. He stood confused, unsure whether this meant success or failure. Mr. Song turned his head, slightly wanting to see what Hunter Sung Jin-Woo thought of this development. But from Jin-Woo's expression, it was clear this wasn't the outcome he expected either. Jin-Woo looked briefly toward Hunter Joo-hee, who was still slumped on the ground, wounded and being tended to. She was still alive, still breathing. And nothing had happened to Mr. Song, no attack, no death, no punishment. After a long pause, Hunter Sung Jin-Woo made his decision. With the help of the remaining hunters, he stood, his body weak, his right leg gone, his soul stretched thin, but he walked. Step by step, he approached the altar. And as he crossed into the circle, a second flame ignited just like it had for Mr. Song. Not long after, a third flame burst to life. 3 of them now stood within the circle. Jin-Woo turned to Mr. Song and asked quietly, "Do you think anyone is coming to rescue us?" Mr. Song looked around at the massive chamber, the looming statues, the lingering silence. "I doubt it," he replied. "Those things will probably start moving again before anyone ever finds us." The thought weighed heavy. They stood in the heart of an unknown dungeon, one far more dangerous than they could have ever imagined. And if they didn't close the gate within 7 days, these monsters, these statues, would escape into the real world. That was the whole point of a raid. Kill the boss, close the gate. But they hadn't even reached the boss yet. And Sung Jin-Woo couldn't shake the feeling that this altar, this ritual, was the final lock before the storm broke loose. He looked back toward Joo-hee and Hunter Kim. If this was truly the final test, then it likely wouldn't begin until all the surviving hunters stepped into the circle. He called out, "Joo-hee, Kim, come here, into the circle." The two looked at each other hesitantly, exhausted, bloodied, afraid. And then Mr. Song walked up to the altar, its surface covered in ancient, unknown symbols he had never seen before. As he stepped fully into the circle, a flame ignited behind him, glowing softly yet ominously. All of the remaining survivors stepped into the circle. As the last of them entered, the final flames ignited, marking each presence. This time they weren't red or orange like the others. They were blue, circling the outer edge of the chamber. Everyone stood frozen in confusion, trying to make sense of what was happening. Suddenly, a deep rumbling echoed from the doorway. All heads turned. The massive stone doors at the far end of the chamber, doors that had been sealed tight since they entered, swung open with a thunderous groan. Eyes widened in disbelief. Even though the doors had opened, the guardian statue that stood beside them didn't move. It remained still, lifeless. But at that moment, no one cared. Those open doors represented freedom, hope. A way out. Shouts erupted among the group, frantic, desperate. They began yelling to one another, pointing toward the exit. But then, new movement. The perimeter statues lining the chamber's walls began to shift, slow, deliberate steps closing in. The hunters were still at the center of the room, and the statues were forming a circle around them. There was no clear path to the exit. Panic started to rise again. That's when Hunter Sung Jin-Woo looked more carefully and noticed something. Some of the statues had stopped. That's when it clicked. He turned to Hunter Joo-hee. Her eyes were shut tight, trembling with fear. Then he turned to the others, his voice growing louder. "Keep your eyes on the statues. Don't blink, don't look away." Just like Hunter D, who had nearly died earlier, the key was line of sight. If you looked away, the statues moved. But if you watched them, they froze. And so with every passing second, the blue lights around the outer circle began to fade one by one. Hunter Sung Jin-Woo didn't dare blink. His vision blurred with strain, sweat dripped into his eyes, but he kept his gaze locked. He couldn't let them move, not even an inch. Suddenly, one of the surviving hunters behind them shouted, then bolted like she had snapped off a leash. Without warning, she ran straight toward the exit. As she crossed the boundary of the inner circle, one of the red flames extinguished, marking her departure. She ran with everything she had, charging toward the open door that led to freedom. On her path stood a knight statue, one of the very same that had killed another hunter who once approached too boldly. Yet she made it past. The remaining hunters gasped, stunned that she had managed to escape unscathed. She was the first to leave this chamber, an unknown figure, someone no one knew much about. But in her desperation, she didn't notice something critical. The gate behind her began to close. It was slight, almost unnoticeable, but Hunter Sung Jin-Woo saw it, and he knew that wasn't a good sign. His mind raced, replaying everything that had happened since they entered this dungeon. Each moment now appeared like pieces of a larger puzzle. The first rule, worship the Lord, the massive statue at the center. The second rule, praise the Lord, run to the musical statues. And now the third, a trial of faith. Jin-Woo's expression tightened as the realization began to take form. This wasn't a test of escape. This was a test of conviction, to remain steadfast even in the face of death. But as he stood trying to fully piece together the final meaning of this ordeal, another hunter walked up to him. "I'm sorry," the man whispered, trembling. I can't stay here." Before Jin-Woo could respond, the man shoved him aside hard. Sung Jin-Woo slammed into the altar, pain flashing through his body. Stunned, he could only watch as the man ran toward the exit. "Wait, get back in here," Jin-Woo screamed, but it was too late. The hunter reached the edge of the chamber, and just like the girl before him, managed to slip past the knights. Behind him, Hunter Joo-hee and Hunter Kim, without waiting for orders, also rushed after him, desperate, wild-eyed. They too passed through. On his face was a mix of shock, betrayal, and something even deeper, dread. Now there were only 3 hunters left in the room, and that was a problem, because as Jin-Woo began to explain, these statues only remained still when being watched. With each person who left, the number of watching eyes decreased. Now there were only 6 eyes left to control dozens of statues. He turned to Mr. Song. "We can't let anyone else leave." Mr. Song, breathing heavily, looked back. Jin-Woo, explain what's happening. He told him that their main goal now was to watch the statues approaching them. He explained that the lights around the outer circle were a timer, and that they would be able to get out of there once the lights disappeared. Hunter Kim believed Hunter Sung Jin-Woo, but still asked him whether the gate would close if the blue lights went out. After listening to what Hunter Kim said, Hunter Sung Jin-Woo realized that Kim wanted to do something he didn't need to. Hunter Kim told Hunter Sung Jin-Woo that he had always looked down on him. He noted that all the survivors were alive only because of Hunter Sung Jin-Woo. He said that he was truly grateful to Hunter Sung Jin-Woo. The bad thoughts in Hunter Sung Jin-Woo's mind, along with the possibilities of Hunter Kim's actions, were not leaving his head. Hunter Kim was completely in tears and snot, talking about how he didn't want to die. He apologized to them and slowly began to move toward the door. Hunter Sung Jin-Woo tried to change his mind about leaving the room, but Hunter Kim couldn't say anything except to keep apologizing. Jin-Woo screamed desperately, trying to change his mind, not wanting to experience the bitterness of betrayal again. Hunter Sung Jin-Woo also shed tears as he experienced that painful feeling of betrayal once again. Mr. Kim's escape would cost them their lives. Faced with such a dire situation, Hunter Sung Jin-Woo didn't know what to do. Hunter Kim left, and the doors to the exit shut even tighter. It wasn't until after Hunter Kim had left that Mr. Song was able to understand the meaning behind the ordeal. Mr. Song said they had no choice but to get out of there. He explained that as long as there was at least one person at the altar, the city would close. But even after hearing this, Hunter Sung Jin-Woo was not willing to give up on Mr. Song, despite the fact that he was missing his right leg. Mr. Song turned to Hunter Joo-hee, asking her to help him get out of there, but before she could answer, something interrupted them. Joo-hee collapsed to the ground as if her legs could no longer hold her. Not expecting anything like this, she didn't even realize what had happened. When she tried to stand, her legs trembled and seemed to refuse to lift her up. She looked at Hunter Sung Jin-Woo in horror, trying to understand what had happened to her legs. To that, Mr. Song said his assumption was that she had used up all her mana, leaving her body in a state of weakness. After that, Hunter Sung Jin-Woo told Mr. Song to get her out of there. After that, Joo-hee and the others began arguing over who would stay in the room and who would get out. But in the end, it became clear that Hunter Sung Jin-Woo and Huntress Joo-hee couldn't get out of there on their own. Mr. Song realized that he would have to get out of there with Huntress Joo-hee after all. In response, Huntress Joo-hee offered her own idea. She would be the one to stay behind. Hunter Sung Jin-Woo remembered his promise to go out to dinner with her. Because he couldn't take her out to dinner, after all, he gave her the only crystal he had earned that day. She refused to take the crystal, and then suddenly jumped up, insisting that she should be the one to stay behind. After all, she suddenly received a rather strong and scathing blow to the neck. Realizing that she was going to keep insisting, someone had made the difficult decision for her. Mr. Song decided to knock her out and carry her himself. Hunter Sung Jin-Woo asked Mr. Song for a favor to take care of her. Though he didn't want to leave him behind, Mr. Song replied that he would do his best. As Mr. Song and Huntress Joo-hee left the place, Hunter Jin-Woo no longer had the strength to even lift his head. And finally, they emerged from the gate. In the eyes of the hunter, one could see a mix of despair, exhaustion, and a deep unwillingness to die. Then came the relief that Mr. Song and Huntress Juhee had made it out of there. And so the stone statues began to approach the only remaining hunter in the room. As the stone statues approached, Hunter Sung Jin-Woo gripped the sword left behind by the traitorous Hunter Kim, using it as his last line of defense. Our bloodied and scarred protagonist is desperately trying to resist doing whatever he can to fight against the overwhelming power of the dungeon. This stone statue of the Hunter of the Living is a minor biped, its imposing figure standing as a formidable opponent in the dungeon. His eyes showed an emptiness akin to the void in the hearts of those who had betrayed him. But after a moment, his gaze shifted, filled with courage and daring, ready to meet his death with dignity. Then one of the stone statues swung at him, its massive arm crashing through the air with deadly intent. The giant halberd pierced through Hunter Sung Jin-Woo's chest, with its massive spear going through him completely. Moments later, it nearly chopped him in half. Blood gushed from his mouth as he staggered, his strength waning with each passing second. With a single and swift upward movement, despite losing a large amount of blood and being struck so hard, Hunter Sung Jin-Woo's eyes showed the immense pain he was in. His expression was filled with the agony of the blow, his body trembling from the impact of the stone statue's attack. Hunter Sung Jin-Woo landed directly on the altar, his blood pouring onto it. Despite the overwhelming pain and the odds stacked against him, he showed with every ounce of his being that he didn't want to die. He recalled Hunter Kim's words before he betrayed him, how he had thanked him, the gratitude now tainted by the betrayal that followed. Afterward, Hunter Kim apologized to Jin-Woo for giving him the burden, as Jin-Woo had said, how he was the only one who would die even though he didn't want to die at all. Now, as if following someone's orders, the statue swung at Hunter Sung Jin-Woo, once again, its massive weapon cutting through the air with relentless force. Hunter Jin-Woo could no longer say anything, his strength fading with each passing moment. As he felt his life slipping away and hope draining, he silently begged for another chance, wishing for a miracle to turn the tide. The statue delivered its final blow, but suddenly it stopped. Something or someone had interrupted its relentless attack. A strange window popped up in front of Hunter Sung Jin-Woo. Not for the first time on the brink of death, Hunter Sung Jin-Woo couldn't understand what it was. The window informed him that he had met all the requirements for the hidden quest, Courage of the Weak. Even after reading what was written in the window, Hunter Sung Jin-Woo didn't understand what it meant. Then another window popped up in front of him, asking if he accepted the assignment. If he refused, his heart would be severed in 0.2 seconds. Since this was his second chance at life, Hunter Sung Jin-Woo decided to take the assignment, knowing that he had no other choice. His body began to glow with an unknown source of light, radiating an intense energy. Meanwhile, the face of that great statue, the one that had killed so many hunters, slowly returned to its original terrifying form. Immediately after accepting the task, a brilliant light consumed everything around Hunter Sung Jin-Woo, engulfing him in its overwhelming radiance.